Hello and welcome to a brand new edition of India's World on Rajya Sabha television with me, Frank Rausan Pereira. External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj is on a 4-day visit to China. On Sunday, she met her Chinese counterpart Wang Yi and discussed a host of bilateral issues and ways to step up the pace of high-level interactions to improve the relationship. Swaraj arrived in Beijing on Saturday on a 4-day visit to take part in the foreign ministers' meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Following the Doklam standoff last year, both countries increased dialogue to scale down tensions and improve relations with talks at various levels. Swaraj and Wang on Sunday met in the immediate backdrop of the recent meeting between National Security Advisor Ajit Doval and a top official of the ruling Communist Party of China, Yang Jiechi, in Shanghai. During their talks, the two sides announced that Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping would hold an informal summit later this week in the central Chinese city of Wuhan. On this edition of India as well, we will analyze the state of ties between India and China. Joining me on the program today are S.R. Tayal, former diplomat, B.R. Deepak, Professor, Center for Chinese Studies, JNU, and Commodore retired Uday Bhaskar, Director, Society for Policy Studies. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of India's World. Ambassador, I'd like to begin with you first. We've seen several high-level visits to China. We've seen that at top levels, we are talking to China as well. Are we moving towards a resetting of ties after what happened at Doklam?
I think after Doklam, there was a lot of rethinking both in India and China that perhaps things are not going as well as they should be. And since February, one has seen that there are several initiatives and several new thinking and actions. When our Foreign Secretary Gokhale went there, on 22nd of February, he had meeting not only with his counterpart, but also with the Foreign Minister Wang Yi and State Councillor Yang Jiechi. After that, their Deputy Ministers visit, then NSA went out, Mr. Dobal was there. So there were a lot of things happening, and which has now culminated. And Wang Yi's statement, Foreign Minister Wang Yi's statement last month, that the Indian elephant and the Chinese dragon can dance together, and there is a lot of synergy, and they can work together. So on both sides, there is a desire to look at things afresh, and now this is really a very bold initiative on the part of the leaders of both the countries to come together on 27th and 28th and try to discuss. And again, in the press statements and the releases, they say overarching long-term perspective for the future of India-China relations. So perhaps they will not go too much in the nitty-gritty and really see what is the vision. What is the vision for Indo-Pacific, whether Indian and Chinese visions can be harmonized, and in that context, how does China see India's role? Because again and again this question arises, whether Indo-Pacific or Asia-Pacific will be unipolar or bipolar or multipolar, and what is India's role? And once there is some agreement or some kind of understanding on that, only then the future will be decided, whether it will be cooperation, competition, or confrontation, or a mix of all the three.
Okay, will it be a mix of all the three C's as listed out by Ambassador Tayal, or will it be something else? Remains to be seen. But, Commodore, what has led to this change in attitude from both sides?
Well, my sense, Frank, is that if we review the events from Doklam of last year to where we are now, Prime Minister Modi will be in Beijing, in China, in Wuhan at the end of the week. My sense is that a certain sense of anxiety and concern in both capitals, that the entire global grid is going through various kinds of turbulence, starting with the United States of America and the fact that President Donald Trump has acted in a manner which has gone against, quote unquote, the standard script about how great powers would normally conduct themselves. Then we have the US-Russia dimension, meaning the kind of tension that has prevailed between Moscow and Washington on a number of issues. And this has been compounded, I think, to a certain degree by the events in West Asia, particularly in Syria. Now, this has often been glossed over, but the very allegation that chemical weapons were used, to me as a security analyst, it represents a very serious kind of transgression. Whether or not it happened, who used it is a matter of detail, but I'm just pointing to what is happening around us at the global level. And concurrently, if you look at Asia, yes, there is cause for hope as far as the Korean Peninsula is concerned, but that is not a done deed as yet, because there was at one time a great anxiety about the possibility that the East Asian region could move to a higher level of contestation, perhaps military confrontation, if North Korea had acted in a certain way. It hasn't happened. But I think my read is that along with the security and strategic dimension, there has also been a lot of turbulence on the trade front. The world, again, thanks to the United States of America and actions taken by them, seems to be moving towards greater protectionism. And we had a situation where the Chinese president was actually championing the cause of free trade. Now, we have a huge challenge in front of us in terms of climate change. It's a really big global issue. And if, again, we touch back to what happened in the Commonwealth, I'm a sailor, so you'll allow me to say this, just the pollution in the global oceans is a huge, huge concern. So my sense is that there were so many developments which really needed some kind of stock taking. And to extend what Skand, Ambassador Tayal had said, if you look at the Chinese statement, they are talking about the two leaders arriving at a strategic conclusion. That's the exact phrase, strategic conclusion. So I think there is a sense that whatever be the nature of the global challenge or the nature of the global opportunity, India and China need to have some degree of consensus. They may not agree. But at least there must be this consultation in a strategic sense and a consensus about how to deal with these situations.
Sure.
That's how I would frame it.
Sure. You know, Professor, as far as India and China are concerned, can they put aside their differences and work together at some level?
I think as far as differences are concerned, some consensus was reached in Astana. And later it was reiterated during the BRICS summit post Doklam that we would not like our differences to become dispute. I think that is the consensus. But to say that the differences would be totally taken out of this relationship, I think that is not possible. I will agree.
But can we work around them?
I think there is a possibility we have been working around, and that is precisely why this summit is happening. I by Ambassador Tayal and Commodore Bhaskar's point that the regional configuration and the global configuration has led this thing to happen, including the bilateral engagements between India and China, especially post Doklam. And there has been, you can say, the signaling from both the sides, right from Wang Yi's visit last year and all up to now whatever is happening. I think more importantly, it is from the Chinese side where they do not want to engage on multi-fronts. So they are already entangled in Asia, especially when it comes to the question of North Korea. And the trade war which is going on between China and United States. In fact, China has been literally shocked of late when United States imposed sanctions on one of their largest telecom companies, the ZTE, on this chips issue. So these things together with India-China bilateral engagement, because I think whatever the analysts or the hawks or doves they say about this relationship, one thing we must recognize that India-China relationship, it is one of the most important relationships of the 21st century. And this has been recognized, and the rebalancing is required for this. And at least the futuristic vision of this relationship has to be chalked out by the leader. There should be a consensus, and that's where we would, we would reserve our differences and engage ourselves as far as win-win cooperation in trade and commerce is concerned.
Sure,
I think that's exactly what is happening. And I believe, India more so requires to take advantage of China's 40 years of reform experience. China is completing 40 years of its reforms, late this year. And in the process, they have accumulated huge capital. They have accumulated, huge experience, and they have made some breakthrough in technologies also. I think it is here where we can build our capacities, on these strong points of the Chinese and prepare ourselves for the economic flight, which is necessary in this country.
There's a lot to learn. There's a lot of experience there as far as China is concerned, is what you're saying, and a lot of takeaways for India. Yes, Commodore.
I'm just saying that perhaps when you say why now, this particular summit, is a question everyone's been asking, particularly in India, where I think there was a lot of surprise when the announcement was made that the summit is as soon as the end of this week. I'm just thinking that perhaps there is a domestic political dimension also. Meaning, I think it is significant that this is the first meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping, particularly after President Xi has been re-elected in such a substantive manner. When if you remember at that time, they said now he's emperor for life.
Yes.
There were all kinds of descriptions about his consolidation of his position within the power grid of Beijing, of China. In like fashion, one could make a case that for Prime Minister Modi, now the NDA-2 is in the last lap. They are preparing for the election in 2019. And I think when Prime Minister Modi took office, there was a sense that he would do something big, something bold on the foreign policy front. He made some attempts, they did not work. And I think perhaps both sides are wiser, if you will, after Doklam. The need to consolidate when they have a certain degree of trust or comfort with each other. So I think to that extent, perhaps, I'm suggesting that there is a political dimension also. And a last point, Frank, very quickly, I think there is a ceiling to what India and China can also do. Maybe they're aware of that also. Because China is steering the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Our Foreign Minister, Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, had gone for part of that engagement. The Defense Minister, Mrs. Sitaraman, is also going to be in China around the same time. If you look at what happened in Kabul and the ongoing terror sort of challenge over there, I mean, today they're saying the death toll will be more than 50. What happened yesterday in the death in the terror blast, which the Islamic State has taken responsibility. And neither India nor China, as stakeholders, have been able to make that difference. Perhaps they are also looking at the regional security situation and the need to bring something substantive to the table to make that difference. Maybe that's a dimension.
Ambassador, what are the areas of cooperation? Everyone has said, like the Commodore has pointed out, the domestic security angle could be one of them, or the regional, I beg your pardon, security angle could be one of them. What are the other areas of cooperation, do you think, between India and China?
Areas of cooperation can be many, but ultimately, if it's a meeting between the Prime Minister and President Xi Jinping to really understand the future of India-China relations, which way they are going, then one has to take into account that basically China is a revisionist power. They are looking for long-term strategic hegemony in Indo-Pacific and short-term economic hegemony by this BRI and all that. In all this, their very clear vision of what China's dream is, where China is headed. How can India, as Professor Deepak said, be a participant, can benefit from it, but not at the expense of our own interests. And ultimately, India is a status quo power. And China is trying to change that status quo incrementally in a very determined way, in a very well-planned way, whether it is South China Sea, whether it is Maldives, whether it is Nepal, whether it is Sri Lanka. So in that context, what Sushma Swaraj said, that border peace and tranquility at the border is of foremost importance. I think that is something on which the two leaders can agree, that nothing like Doklam in the coming summer and later. That means if you make a road, there should be some kind of a communication. That 2015 agreement has been there on defense agreement. There are all kinds of channels of communication at the border. So
clear drawing of red lines then.
Clear drawing of red lines on the border. I think that there is no unpleasantness, because that fouls the atmosphere very, very badly. If on that there is some agreement, then some other things can follow. The trade, there are issues are so many. But the main thing which fouls the atmosphere is some tension on the border, where China incrementally tries to change the status quo.
Indeed. Professor, when Xi Jinping visited India in 2014, there was a sense of euphoria in the media that, they're going to see a wave of change in the relationship between India and China. That has not happened. We saw Doklam happening after that. Even now, expectations are high before Prime Minister visits Wuhan in China. You know, how is anything going to be different this time around?
Expectation would always be high, you know, given the sheer size of both the countries. You know, China, 13 point plus trillion-dollar economy, and India, you know, one of the fastest emerging economies. So expectations are really, really high. You know? And there's no doubt about it, because there are potentials for this expectation, you know, to be realized. I think, you know, one thing we need to agree, and I hope Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping said they will reach a consensus, as Ambassador Tayal said, that there would be consensus that at least, you know, peace and tranquility at the border, it would be, you know, maintained. There would be consensus of that. Then only movement on other areas would be, we can think about those, you know. But I think border is not only the security, not the only security concern now, you know. So we have been, you know, arguing time and again that the security boundary between India and China, it has sprawled in so many areas, you know. It's not only limited to the border. It is maritime security, it is, you know, various traditional and other non-traditional security, including piracy and terrorism, as Commodore Bhaskar said, pointed out. So it is huge, and the interest of both India and China in whatever security, you know, paradigm we look into. So they are overlapping, including Indo-Pacific. So I think the traditional mindset that, you know, this is going to the Chinese backyard or this is going to the Indian backyard. So I think that we have to somehow, you know, shed. And sure, if we don't do that, then we are surely heading for the problems. Then how do we overcome these? I think for these summits, you know, at various levels, whether the highest level or ministerial level or various other dialogue mechanisms we can think of, you know, I think at this point in time, the dialogue mechanism between India and China, so they are very, very scarce. You know, very few dialogue mechanisms are there. We really need to institutionalize these and build sure, more, so that the flow of people between India and China, from the present 1 million, it may go to, you know, 100 millions. You know, 2.5 billion people, and you know, just 1 million people going between the two countries. So I think we really need to reset this relationship and comprehensively think about various facets of relationship, including, you know, trade, investment, people-to-people relations at various levels, and see how we can build capacities. I think building capacities, I would say, it is, you know, the crux of the relationship sure, as far as India is concerned. We really look into that. We really need to look into that, and for that, I think we can be, you know, in partners with China, and we can, without giving away our national interest, have, you know, benefit from China, and you know, create a platform right, for that flight for our economy, you know, in the future. That is the need of the hours. I hope, you know, during this summit, this is reached, this consensus is reached. You know.
Okay, yeah, taking the discussion forward now, you know, Commodore. The messaging has been good. Messaging has been, you know, bright so far from the Chinese side. But can we take it at face value? You know, at the end of the day, the messaging before a visit like this has always been good, but China doesn't follow through. So what's to say that the same is not going to happen this time around?
I think we should consider that exigency, you know, because we have discussed India-China relations many times. As you rightly pointed out, in 2014, there was a lot of expectation that there would be some kind of a movement. But the reality, Frank, is that from 1962, October, when we had the limited hostilities and the India-China war, to where we are now, it's 56 years. There has been no movement at all, as far as any kind of, even the maps have not been exchanged in any significant manner. These are the realities. Yes, it is positive that after the agreement between Prime Minister Narasimha Rao at that time and Mr. Jiang Zemin, not a shot has been fired in anger. And in many ways, Doklam of last year tested that particular resilience. And to the credit of both sides, you know, not a shot was fired. So far, that's been a very positive attribute. But I do want to draw attention and say that there is a trust deficit, meaning that in Beijing, there is a perception about Delhi and the way Delhi conducts this bilateral, which is not very flattering to the image of India. In like fashion, there is a deeply held view in India, in Delhi, that Beijing acts in a manner, particularly in collusion with Pakistan, which has been detrimental to India's interests. And we have a litany of things. I mean, we just have to talk about the NSG and the role played by China there. We have to talk about terrorism or recall the issue of Hafiz Saeed, the way in which China has taken a stand on that. You know, like this, there are certain issues where, as I would say, it is a trust deficit issue. So this particular meeting, I think, is significant that both President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi are willing to again engage, and this is a bilateral that has been put together at very short notice, preparatory to the meeting in June, meaning that when they meet at the summit level in a different forum, they do not want this to be deflecting whatever is being discussed at that time. So to that extent, I would say that perhaps there is a greater kind of realism on both sides about what to expect. And I think rightly, as has been pointed out, our foreign minister has already indicated what are the Indian concerns. But India has also put out an olive branch, because if you remember in the run-up starting February, and Skand mentioned this point, Mr. Ambassador Tayal, that the foreign secretary had put out a kind of advisory in the public domain in relation to Tibet. That was a very significant political gesture by India. India expected that there would be some reciprocity, that's my sense, but we have not seen anything in the public domain at least. So I think India is also trying to create an appropriate kind of environment where, to pick up Deepak's point, that we do not surrender or give up on what we deem to be. We haven't used the word core interest, that's a term that China uses, but we have indicated what are issues of national importance, national interest, which have been inherited from 1962.
Sure.
Because we all said the same thing. India and China will not be able to arrive at a consensual territorial dispute resolution, accommodation, unless there is political will. It can't be done by cartographers.
Right. Sure.
That's the point.
Sure. Ambassador, going forward, what shape do you see the India-China relationship taking?
I think it will continue to be in the realm of uncertainty. Both countries will be wary of each other, but flashpoint should not be there. Perhaps that should be the minimum. And ultimately, if this informal summit, I read somewhere that they may not even come out with a formal document, and if it is about vision, then perhaps Prime Minister should ask President Xi Jinping that what is his vision of Pakistan. Does China want a very Islamized, very militarized, very backward looking Pakistan? And what will be the implications for Afghanistan? And can somehow they can convince Pakistan not to take so much of action against India, terrorism, etc. Ultimately, it boils down to this, that is China a well-wisher of India, or does China want to contain India and keep it bottled in South Asia? On that, whatever Prime Minister Modi understands from President Xi Jinping, I think the future course of relations would depend on that.
Indeed. And Professor, close the show for us with your concluding remark on what's going to be on the table, do you think, when Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping meet?
I think whole sort of issues from border, to issues of regional interest, including the global interest, where there are convergences, even where there are differences, all would be, I think there would be heart-to-heart talks between two leaders, even if there is no outcome to this, But I think more importantly, it would give a signal to various constituencies inside China as well as inside India, so that India and China, they need to engage in a pragmatic, constructive way, so that the frictions, so they are done away with, and a stage is set for a robust India-China partnership for the future. I think I still remain optimistic, even if there are a lot of differences between the two countries. We will reserve the differences and forge ahead as far as our interests are concerned.
Okay, all right. On that note, then we'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of India's World. I'd like to thank all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. We'd like to have your feedback as well. You can email us at indiasworld.feedback@gmail.com, and you can also tweet to us using our Twitter handles at FRP09 and at Rajya Sabha TV. That's it from me. See you again next time.